How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here. It is December 23rd, 2025. The time of this video dropping early in the AM, but I'm recording this the night prior, not long removed from after I did my live stream breaking down Jeff McNeil being traded to the Athletics. So in case you guys did not check out our initial reactions and analysis of that news, pairing that with the Ketel Marte news that the Mets are in the market for him, please make sure you watch that live show after you found yourself watching this video, because we're going to start today's discussion and break down more on Ketel Marte, how he could be a fit versus maybe why he isn't a logical fit when looking at the positional need versus lack thereof for this Mets team. From there, we will get into the other latest reporting, which has dropped over the past 24 hours, which has stated the Mets are in fact in the market specifically for a right-handed bat that could very well help balance their lineup. What exactly is the type of bat that they could find themselves landing? We're going to deep dive in total today. 8+ players, from not only ready bat fits to also more at Ketel Marte, to talking a bit more on Cody Bellinger, as the Mets are obviously in that market still, and we have some clarity as to the kind of years that Bellinger may in fact be landing that maybe is a little different than what you initially thought. That and a whole lot more to deep dive in this one, everybody, so sit back, relax, and get yourself ready for the ride, which is our latest breakdown here in WardyNYM. All I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe on your way in. Let me know all your initial thoughts, reactions, and analysis in the comments down below, and shout out to our amazing sponsor, as always, at SeatGeek, that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Just use my promo code WARDY10, that is WARDY10, for 10% off your next ticket purchase, whether that is going to be for NFL tickets, NBA tickets, NHL tickets, concert shows, comedy shows, UFC events, boxing, you name it. For all things in the ticketing space, our great friends at SeatGeek will always have you covered. Check them out, WARDY10, for 10% off your next ticket purchase, link down below. Now let's deviate away from these awesome Ketel Marte highlights, and let's get into our bulk of discussion here, which is going to start regarding Ketel Marte. But just to reaffirm for those who did in fact not see this past day, from Francis Romero, who does a very solid job covering all aspect of MLB news. He's been more credible as each passing year has transpired, and he broke down the following: that with Jeff McNeil gone, the Mets are believed to be exploring Ketel Marte, or at least discussing him in trade talks per an industry source. Now, again, of course, having discussions about a player and actually landing them are two different things. So as has been the case all offseason long with the news and rumblings for the Mets, until we find out pen to paper that the Mets have acquired a player in a signing or that an actual trade was finalized, of course, take these rumors and rumblings with a grain of salt, because we don't exactly know what David Stearns is going to do. And Stearns has been rather stealthy in his decision-making that we've seen this offseason. Besides the signing of Devin Williams, everything has really come out of the blue, where there wasn't much prior reporting regarding that said player, whether it was Jorge Polanco, Luke Weaver, trading BrandonNYM, you name it. So for better or for worse, David Stearns is going to continue to dismantle this team to his liking, to build it up in a way that he seems best fit, or deems best fit rather, for 2026 and beyond. And let's begin here more on the Ketel Marte topic, because there is no denying that when you think of a player profile that could impact the Mets tremendously for the 2026 season, few do a better job on the offensive end than one Ketel Marte. And as we broke down last night, and we'll continue to do that right now, Marte checks off so many boxes for this Mets team to have you excited on the prospect of landing him. But the obvious wrinkle in this is the Mets already traded for Marcus Semien. So where does Ketel Marte find himself as a fit? And this is where, after doing a lot of pondering and thinking, I've come to the conclusion that Marte could be utilized in various positions, okay? Ketel Marte actually used to play center field going back to the 2021 season for the Diamondbacks, got a solid amount of reps out there, but I will preface by saying that he was far from a defensive, a positive player in that regard. He was a defensive liability, most certainly. If the Mets are really going to hold true on wanting to emphasize run prevention, it's hard to envision them rolling out Ketel Marte in center field to begin next season unless A, they really have confidence in handling it there for a short period of time, and or B, this is a route that the Mets are confident in because they think that their offense will best maybe some of the defensive woes. Contrary from what us fans have believed that David Stearns is playing to build this club for, but the jury's still out as to what exactly he's going to do, so let's go ahead and break down more on Ketel and why he's a fit. Because if Marte is not going to get reps at second base, because you really want Marcus Semien there, he could be someone that transitions more to third base, which would box Beatty out. I'm not saying we should trade Beatty. I'm just saying that would become a greater likelihood that the Mets could shop Beatty and say a deal for a frontline ace of a starter, for example. So all I know is that after losing Jeff McNeil, the Mets now have more questions than answers than ever before, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. They're able to fill these holes and fill these areas of needs in ways that are not only creative, conservative, but have higher upside versus what the Mets had as a collective product in what was a down, truly abysmal 2025 season. From a rotation that was injury plagued to an offense that was far from clutch, they had a lot of things in turmoil and going wrong, and they needed major change. But Ketel Marte is most certainly a certainty on the front of his offensive upside. 95th percentile in batting room value, 97th in xWOBA, 96th in expected batting average, 94th in expected slugging, well above league average in average exit velocity, barrel percentage, hard hit, bat speed, scored up percentage, chase percentage, whip percentage, K percentage, and walk percentage. The only thing that's down is a sweet spot, but who cares in comparison? 74th percentile and outs above average, which is nice to see. However, when you look at more of his defensive metrics, he hasn't been an overly dominant defensive player through Fangraphs and on others. So really depends as to what you care more about when evaluating an infielder's rating. Do you care solely about outs above average? Do you care about DRS? Do you care about offense and defensive metrics through Fangraphs and others? I'm trying to balance the two. And what I've come to the conclusion is that Marte is a solid defender, but not necessarily someone that is going to be moving the needle for you. You're not acquiring a Ketel Marte for the upside that he brings defensively, as you are far more focused on his offensive product. And that's why we're talking about him, because Ketel Marte all around was a better offensive player than even Pete Alonso last year. Doesn't matter that he didn't hit north of 40 home runs, 28 home runs, 72 RBIs there, 87 runs scored for Ketel Marte this past season, a 283 average, as well as a 376 on base, a 517 slug, good for a 4.6 WAR, and 45% above league average as a batter. In contrast to Alonso, I believe, was around the 142 WRC plus, so a little bit higher than Alonso. And this is what I mean. The Mets are more than likely going to replenish the offensive need that was Alonso in other areas. It might not be as stereotypical as, oh, they're going to go ahead and just land a great first base profile that can slug. They may do that, but it's kind of slim pickings as to what's out there, but we're going to break them all down extensively here in a second. But Ketel Marte makes a lot of sense for the Mets if they're really trying to bring in a player that's a win-now player, a guy who does have an albatross of a contract. Not that the average annual value is bad, because it's actually a very good team-friendly deal, but what's not team-friendly about Ketel Marte is that he's entering his age 33 season, and he's locked down until 2031. Not ideal at all. So that right away is what I feel is the biggest wrinkle behind acquiring him, along with, again, the proper fit for the organization. Is there a world where the Mets could platoon Ketel Marte at first base with Jorge Polanco, two guys that aren't known for their first base upside, but are also two guys that have had fair share of work? I know what Polanco stated with the media today, his presser over the past day, rather, that, he had a lot of great work that he did with the Mariners over a multi-month span on getting a lot of pregame work at first base to get him more comfortable so that way he could approach teams this offseason, including the Mets, to say, hey, if you want me at first base, I know I can handle that comfortably. Maybe Ketel Marte falls a little bit in that category, but again, I'll have to see it to believe it for that to make somewhat of logical sense. So let's just go with the assumption now that if the Mets trade for Ketel Marte, he'd play second or third base. And whichever position he's not playing, you would see Marcus Semien there. For the times he's in the infield, he'd be at DH, and then he could platoon DH with Jorge Polanco. It would be awesome to see three really good dominant switch hitters in the same lap, in Lindor, Marte, and Polanco. You could see how that would thrive in a lot of ways. The only big question, again, is truly defensive linemen, as well as what you'd have to give up for a talent like Ketel Marte, because we all know how talented of a player Ketel is and will continue to be for at least the next couple years. But for me, with Ketel Marte, it's like, A, you're going to have to give up a king's ransom. The Diamondbacks are going to call and ask for one of Jonathan, Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat as the headliner in the deal, because they would love controllable pitching, and kind of go on from there. And I guess my only true question that I have for Mets fans is, and this really does pick up steam, that this goes from the Mets just having a level of interest and, talking about the idea of trading for Marte versus actually being deep in negotiations that it might materialize after a team like the Red Sox appear out on Ketel after acquiring Wilson Contreras, and reports have suggested that they have died down those Ketel Marte trade talks since. I really just do want to hear from you Mets fans. Would you guys be in favor of acquiring Ketel Marte, eating his entire contract, if it meant that the Mets headlining package the other way was one of Brandon Sproat or Jet Williams as like the true headliner? Because again, why would you keep Jet Williams in the organization if he's going to be blocked fairly long term, especially if the Mets block his outfield upside as well by acquiring outfielders that are more of an immediate fit. So, not that I want to see Jet Williams traded, I'm just trying to connect the dots here. If you're going to acquire someone like Ketel, it further boxes Jet Williams out from having at all an opportunity to succeed at the major league level in 2026. And if you're the Diamondbacks, why wouldn't you ask for a guy like Jet Williams separately in this deal, as he could very well be your infielder for the future to help replenish and replace one Ketel Marte? So I want to know, what do you think it'll take for Ketel Marte and his services? How much do you think it'll change if the Mets took on the entirety of the contract? And do you think that this is somewhere where the Mets could do it as a kind of need-for-need fit? Or a Diamondbacks team that wouldn't mind an upgrade to their rotation, would they have an appetite to bring on one of Kodai Singer or David Pearson as part of a trade that maybe lessens the prospect haul the Mets would have to give up in a deal like this? Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them down below, and thank you so much for exactly that, because I can talk all day about Ketel Marte and how brilliant he is, but we got 7 other players that we got to break down in today's discussion, so I really don't want to waste too much time on this one. So now, going off from talking on Ketel Marte and all the brilliant upside that he brings in the right setting, the right situation, let's now go ahead and talk about the other topics in Mets land that I've been wanting to relay to each and every one of you. And I would like to first get into this conversation by reiterating what we have here, which is the following, okay? How the Mets will move forward. This was a piece that came out late night from Will Salmon, our friend on the platform of The Athletic, with Ken Rosenthal. How the Mets will move forward. Red Sox discussing another Cardinal. Mariners banking on Yun, who's at the helm there in the front office. Why Ketel Marte won't work for the Braves, which is awesome news here if you're a Mets fan in the market for Ketel Marte. Starter market continues to percolate Okamoto, and it's okay to deal with the Rays. As they emphasized in this article, the Rays have made a lot of bad trades over the past couple years where it has not graded or worked out well for them whatsoever. And we know David Stearns has had an appetite to trade with the Rays more than any other team in baseball since he became team president for the club. So when we talk about the Rays, we talk about guys like Yandy Diaz, I'll get into shortly, among others, but I think the Rays are still very much a fit for the Mets to be a trade partner with, and that goes right in hand with this discussion. But let me start off by emphasizing a quote that I thought was fairly hilarious, and I'd love to know your reaction about it, okay? And I quote, "What they've done, that being the Mets, after trading McNeil especially, tells you how big of, pardon my French, kiddos, shit show their clubhouse was," said one rival executive who was granted to stay anonymous for his candor. The guessing is over. It was a disaster. So how fitting. A rival executive that would quite literally couldn't give two you-know-whats about goes out of his way to say how much the Mets had a shit show of a clubhouse when he wasn't part of it, wasn't well enough connected to just make this remark confidently without making sure that he was anonymous. I'm sorry, but it's remarks like that just crack me up, because these people, again, don't have a clue what they're talking about. Yes, rival executives have intel and have more connections than the average fan. That is true. But what's also true is that unless you're hearing from the horse's mouth of someone actively in the Mets front office, actively part of the organization that's there day in, day out, sharing their choice opinions about what's actually going on in the clubhouse, it reaches a moot point to suggest that, oh, there's a massive problem. Like, guys, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put 2 and 2 together that Jeff McNeil was traded because A, he doesn't have a fan on the roster anymore. B, he's a salary dump because the Mets don't have an issue parting ways with that salary. They've tried for multiple years now. And C, McNeil has stuck out like a sore thumb for years regarding his clubhouse antics both on and off the field. Now, Lindor, of course, is one of these guys who's fallen in that category as well. But the difference between Lindor and McNeil is that Lindor will go down potentially in the Hall of Fame as a New York Met. Jeff McNeil, for as talented as he is, will finish his 8-year tenure as a New York Met as being a slap-hitting god who peaked after the 2022 season and will never be that player again, at least not in a Mets uniform, especially with how they've utilized him. Jeff has been notoriously known for, of course, being very upset, F-bombs galore after every simple ground out they did endlessly in the 2023 and 2024 season down to the first base, among others. And we know that he's tried to get better with his personality and with his emotions getting the best of him, and that has held true at times. We've seen him fluctuate a lot, biting his tongue. And what is also true is that McNeil's been doing this forever, well before the Mets have really, I think, tried to see the difference in their clubhouse a bit. Like, McNeil's been a certainty of a guy that's stuck out like a sore thumb in that regard. So, no, this is far less to do about the Mets having a very tumultuous clubhouse, as this is common sense. The Mets broke up a core that brought them only one truly valiant playoff run in a 7+ year span of having them together, going back to the start of the 2019 season or so. Common sense tells you that if you're not going to be able to win with that core, regardless of the pitching being a heavy factor as to the lack of winning this past year, it still holds true. It makes sense why you would like to not only blow it up, but build the team how you deem best fit, that being David Stearns not having any of these long-term contract tie downs, with the exception of Lindor and Soto, which again are nice exceptions because they're both unbelievably great, talented players that you want part of your organization. So that's all I have to say about that, but let's get into why you likely clicked on this video separate from Ketel Marte. And it states the following. The Mets hold interest in adding a right-handed batter to balance out their lineup. People familiar with their conversation said that could end up being someone who could also play first base. The club needs to make a decision on whether such a player is better than Mark Vientos. More likely, they would have to find that player in a trade than free agency. And it also states that guys like Alex Bregman and Bo Bichette are the best right-handed bats available in this year's market right now, but likely command more years than the Mets would tolerate, which is very much true, and we know this. So, again, we're going to talk briefly on Bregman. We'll talk even less about Bichette in this one, but I'd like to break down the laundry list of players that make logical sense for this organization that are potential first base profiles, batting from the right side, and, of course, are guys that you very well could see at first base. Not that they need to be at first base, but Salmon doesn't go out of his way to suggest that without knowing fairly confidently that's probably the route the Mets want to go from everything that he's heard. So, Alvin out of the room. Why didn't the Mets pull off a trade with for Wilson Contreras from the Cardinals when he checked off literally all those boxes? Wilson Contreras is a great trade for the Red Sox, one I would have loved for the Mets to do, but here's the simple reason why it didn't happen more than anything else. One, the Red Sox and the Cardinals have been a really nice match because the Cardinals like specifically what the Red Sox have to offer in their farm. But more notable than anything else is the fact of who is in the Cardinals front office now helping run ship. It's Chaim Bloom. You guys know Chaim Bloom? Yeah, Chaim Bloom used to be the GM of the Red Sox when they traded Mookie Betts, and he purposely was hired by Boston because he showed a willingness to be basically that face of doing an ownership decision that no one was going to be happy about. So, you think of Luka Doncic being traded from the Mavericks over this past year, as we saw Nico was clearly the guy, the fall guy, as that was an ownership move as they're trying to relocate, move out of that area and build a casino. That is accurate. Do the homework in case you guys are unaware on the NBA front. And he's since been fired. Well, a key decision as to why Chaim Bloom was initially hired by the Red Sox all those years ago was because of his willingness to, again, be that face for fans to throw tomatoes at for trading Mookie Betts, when in reality, the Red Sox just did not want to invest long-term money of an investment in Mookie Betts. That's failed miserably since then. We know that terrible decision, but the point stands. Chaim Bloom, what did he do during his time in Boston outside of trading away Mookie Betts to the Dodgers? He built a tremendous farm, and he's had his hands on all over that farm. That's blossomed into one of the best in baseball, especially the American League, each the past couple of years. So when you start to realize what the Red Sox have done this offseason, they made little to no major league signings yet, but they made big moves on the trade market. What are the biggest moves they made on the trade market? Oh, yeah, they traded for Sonny Gray from the Cardinals. And oh, yeah, they traded from Wilson Contreras. And oh, yeah, this article states that they're actively in the talks for Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals. So why is there this long-lasting Cardinals-Red Sox bias of a connection? It's because Chaim Bloom is working directly in hand with Craig Breslow from one former Red Sox GM to another, and Chaim sees a lot of the guys that he drafted or helped develop, and he wants them a part of the Cardinals organization because he knows them really well. So before Mets fans get themselves even more in a twist as to why didn't we trade for Wilson Contreras, I agree with you. He would have been a slam dunk fit for this organization, especially knowing they're in the market for a guy like him. But clear as day, Chaim Bloom, unfortunately for us Mets fans, has been that X factor for the Cardinals in their front office. It makes so much sense after connecting the dots. I was texting my guy Robbie Hyde, another awesome YouTuber in this space, last night talking about this, and as soon as he mentioned Chaim Bloom, I'm like, you're 100% right. I don't know why I didn't connect those dots sooner. Makes endless sense. So now going on as to why Contreras didn't happen, let's get into the players that very well could happen. And let's talk briefly about a player who I've emphasized a lot on the platform lately, but he makes more sense now than ever before. You want to go ahead and land a right-handed bat that can profile at first base, that's more logical in the trade route than the free agent market? Look no further than Yandy mother effing Diaz. And the reason why I'm talking about this so emphatically is because I really like Yandy Diaz. I love the fact that David Stearns has traded with the Rays more than any other team in recent years to suggest that he very well could be a really nice fit for this organization. Yandy Diaz is not a defensive juggernaut, okay? He leaves a bit to be desired there at first. However, he's still better than Alonso, who, Pete, as we know, is a massive defensive liability. Diaz isn't anything much greater, but still better to a degree. And Yandy has the versatility that if you need to put him at third for a game, you can do it. You just don't really want to do it. More so a DH first base profile with the 2027 club option. Yandy Diaz is part of a Rays organization that just traded Brandon Lowe away, their former all-star second baseman. They may very well part ways with more expiring contracts like Yandy, who's kind of on a rental contract, knowing it's a club option that a team doesn't need to buy into for 2027 if they wish to not do so. But Diaz has been so steady in his career, one of my favorite batters in the American League, of a profile that fits for the Mets right now. 25 home runs, 83 RBIs, 300 batting average in 150 games, 366 on base, 482 slug, 3 WAR, 35% above league average as a batter. If the Mets pull off a trade for Yandy Diaz, that with Polanco as a first base DH platoon would be brilliant. I would not complain about it at all. Yes, you're going to have some defensive hiccups, but outside those defensive hiccups, you're going to have an offense that's really going to look nice and look balanced. And Yandy has been such a great high contact hitter while not letting his power go anywhere. And naturally, what you will see a trend of with the majority of players I break down in today's video is that the main question that lies with a lot of these players is that they're coming from small markets and they're also coming from ballparks in which they've been very hitter-friendly. How will the transition be if, say, the Mets acquire a guy like Yandy going from Tampa's whole career to now batting at Citi Field for half the season for 2026? And now handling, of course, all the elements of being in a big market with the media that pales in comparison night and day from being a Tampa Bay Ray. These are always the questions that we will have going after the certain players that we're breaking down today, but it doesn't change the fact that they very well could have a lot of success in Queens with Soto, with Lindor, with Simeon, and everyone else that they're trying to build this puzzle piece together, whatever it's going to turn out to be for David Stearns and co. this offseason. But Yandy, I don't really think I need to pitch too much to you guys about him. We've broken him down extensively on the platform over the past number of days, but just to reiterate him a little bit more, these are Ketel's numbers, so let's deviate away from them for a second. I just want you guys to take a peek at Yandy Diaz's baseball savant numbers in case you guys haven't seen. Again, such a steady bat, a 932 OPS in 2023, a 755 last year, but now it's 848 respectable here in 2025. So even though he's getting into his age 35 season, who cares? There's no long-term commitment. And the Mets clearly want short-term options for these positions to fill to a degree, with the exception of someone like Cody Bellinger, because just because they're short-term options doesn't mean they're bad options. They very well could be proficient options. And Yandy Diaz, so elite with the bat, 90th percentile in batting rate value, 84th in xWOBA, 94th in expected batting average, 94th in average exit velocity, 94th in hard hit percentage, 72nd in bat speed, 84th in squared up percentage, 76th in chase percentage, 85th in whip percentage, 88th in K percentage, above league average in walk percentage, below league average in sweet spot, but who cares? Barrel percentage just below league average, and outs above average in around the 20th percentile. And again, not a lot to be desired on the base running, but that's okay. Yandy Diaz has been a stud offensively for literally his entire career. He doesn't look like he's going to have an immediate drop-off, God willing, should the Mets trade for him. And as we know, again, Stearns has dealt with the Rays more than any other team since he's become club president. So one does have to wonder, could the Mets have another trick up their sleeve to make a trade for Yandy Diaz happen after losing out on Wilson Contreras when Yandy literally checks off every single box of what Will Salmon stated in that article? The Mets are in need of a righty bat in the middle of the lineup that they're looking for, especially one that very well could get reps at first base, that can handle first base. Look literally no further than the guy we've been talking about the past 72 plus hours on the platform, and Yandy Diaz. But if it ain't going to be someone like Yandy, there are other options to consider. And let's go on from talking about a current Tampa Bay Ray to breaking down a former Tampa Bay Ray. And let's break down one Isaac Paredes. Now, I know you may say to yourself, Wardy, Isaac Paredes is not a true first baseman. Why would the Mets go after him? Because the trend that you're going to see with some of these guys today, especially Paredes, is that these are guys that are like Mark Vientos profiles of guys that can play third, can play first, can play DH, aren't really that great defensively anywhere you play them, or a bat first player. But what does Isaac Paredes have that Mark Vientos has not had to begin his career? It's a bit of consistency, okay? And he's young. He's only entering his age 27 season. He's been involved in trade talks this offseason regarding the Astros, and this feels like a need-for-need situation, especially if the Mets trade for him. Like, if the Mets trade for Isaac Paredes, I could see a David Peterson going the other way as being part of that deal. And the process, the Mets would then upgrade the rotation, God willing, with maybe a former ace of the Astros and Framber Valdez, who's still available in the free agent market, or someone else along those lines that has better upside than Peterson, and move forward, because they're still in the market for pitching even after the three-team trade that they just did with the Pirates and the Rays over the past couple of days. And Paredes is someone who could be had at the right price. Now, as I said with Yandy, Paredes, same exact profile. A guy who's thrived in batter's parks throughout his career, especially during his time not only in Tampa, but most recently in Houston. And he did have that little short stop in Chicago, but then they had him as part of the Kyle Tucker trade, which, you know, if you're an Astros fan, you kind of have to love how that trade has looked between the top prospect that you got and Cam, and who blossomed this year to a degree, and then Isaac Paredes and everyone else in company. But Isaac dealt with ailment this year, but when healthy, he was very good. 102 games, 438 plate appearances, 53 runs scored, 20 home runs, 53 RBIs, 254 average, 352 on base, 458 slug, good for a 2.5 WAR season, and 28% above league average. Paredes had an 840 OPS in the 2023 season, a 739 OPS last year, splitting time from the Rays to the Cubs, and now I believe the Rays to the Cubs, if I'm not mistaken, or was he Seattle? Did he have a shortstop in Seattle? I could be confusing myself. Either way, Paredes has been on a couple clubs early in his career. Again, a similar profile to Vientos, who doesn't look great defensively, but he's also fluctuated a good amount defensively. Again, he was in the 19th percentile at the hot corner this year, but in 2024, he was just below league average there, and that's above average. In 2023, he was league average that we saw, and in 2022, he looked really, really good, and what I'm sure was a smaller sample, but his offensive trends have stayed pretty similar. A guy that doesn't have the best expected numbers, as you can see here, but a lot to like from the sweet spot down. And again, I told you guys I don't care much about sweet spot because I don't. But what I do care about is this. Squared up percentage that we see here, 59th percentile, 90th in chase percentage, 89th in whip percentage, 74th in K percentage, 83rd in walk percentage. Very disciplined hitter is what Isaac Paredes is. And he's a guy that I really think could be a nice little pair with Jorge Polanco splitting time at first base, because Polanco said in his presser yesterday that he was told he'll get a solid amount of reps at first base while, of course, playing other infield positions and DH. But the jury's still out as to really how much playing time he's going to get there, and it clearly goes in hand as to what else the Mets do to add to their lineup and that first base profile. So Paredes, who can play third, who can play DH, but most certainly can handle first in limited sample sizes, this is a world where, again, if you're going to platoon guys that maybe aren't the most defensively sound at first, but bring the offensive production you're looking for, bring a level of versatility, I can see this being a logical fit. So Isaac Paredes, again, a former Tampa Bay Ray, if the Mets don't go Yandy Diaz, I wouldn't be opposed to someone like Paredes at the right price too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about him in the comments down below. Because if it ain't going to be Isaac, why wouldn't it be the actual first baseman of the Houston Astros that they wouldn't mind shedding some of that salary after what was a solid year, but when looking at the underlying numbers, not all that great for the aging first baseman. Christian Walker initially signed 3 years, $60+ million contract with the Astros after leaving the Diamondbacks, going from one batter's box to another. Again, here's the trend. A lot of guys from smaller markets, from batter's boxes for half the season. How do they transition to a big market like New York and Citi Field, which is very much so a pitcher's park? That is where the jury is still out. But when we look at someone like Walker in particular, again, there are things to like about him. I don't think that he's a terrible profile at all, especially if you're going to look for, again, a guy that brings you more value of someone who's been at first for a good amount of his career and can platoon with Polanco there. Walker might honestly be one of the most realistic fits for this organization when looking at a true first base DH profile that bats on the right side. This is essentially Wilson Contreras, just not as good because one, Walker's a little bit older, and two, he's coming off of a year that, had him a lot around league average as a hitter, but for the first time in a number of years, couldn't even touch 800 on the OPS. He finished with a 718 OPS, had 803 the year prior, and had an 830 OPS in the 2023 season. So he's been on a trend downward in that regard. The home run power has stayed steady, so that's good. 27 home runs, 88 RBIs, 230 average, 297 on base, 421 slug, but only a 1 WAR. That shows you the difference between his value versus someone like Paredes this past year in a smaller sample size. But Walker's one of these guys that, again, I think could be had, especially if the Mets aren't giving up a king's ransom in a trade for him. And as I mentioned with Peterson, could be a route where it's kind of a need for a need type thing, or it would make some logical sense as to why you pull off this kind of deal. Now, is Walker my favorite option? Most certainly not. I think if the Mets could try to land Yandy Diaz, they could try to land one of those guys, it'd be great. But what Walker does bring is some level of defensive value at least. 79th percentile and outs above average this past year. It's very good. He also, through Fangraphs, wasn't a massive defensive liability either. So one does have to wonder, is this enough of a profile to check off enough boxes for David Stearns to say this is the guy we got to go after now that Wilson Contreras just unfortunately wasn't able to happen? Something that we're going to ponder and continue to think about until we find out who exactly they're going to land as that righty bat for this lineup. But Christian Walker, when looking at all the guys available in the trade market to varying degrees, he does check off more boxes than not by the passing second as we break down guys that are logical fits for this organization to varying degrees. But to show you just more here on Christian Walker, as you guys can see from here, some of his highlights. Another thing that I don't hate about Christian Walker is, again, unlike some of the other guys that we're talking about today, he's not only been more defensively established throughout his career, but he's just been pretty steady. You know, like, that's another thing. Like, Yandy Diaz has been steady, greater than Walker from an offensive output, but Christian in his own right has been a pretty solid bat for the past north of a decade now. Like, the past 7 seasons at least, Christian Walker has been pretty much a surefire thing in what you're getting. A guy that can give you anywhere from 20 to 30 home runs a season, anywhere from 75 to 100 RBIs, depending on how deep of a lineup he's in, how productive he's been, has shown his ability to be clutch in the past when called upon for both the Diamondbacks and the Astros, and it's just a nice solid player. And when you think of it in this lens, if you could have Christian Walker and Jorge Polanco as your first base DH platoon instead of Pete Alonso and Starling Marte, I'm kind of more in favor of Walker and Polanco just because of how much more value Polanco brings to you than Starling Marte. And it's ironic that I say that considering Jorge stated in his presser yesterday that a huge selling point to him to land with the Mets was not only the Mets' tremendous family and team hospitality, how good they take care of players, which we've universally heard since Cohen became owner. But who's the man who actually put that in Polanco's ear? He credited Starling Marte for reaching out to him and saying exactly that. So I don't know what the Mets need to do to make sure Starling Marte is a part of the organization to make Juan Soto happy. I don't want the Mets to sign him as a DH profile where he's going to have even less options than before, and that might justify why the Mets don't do more there. I wouldn't be happy about that. But again, in a role where you could bring Starling Marte back to be more of an advisor than anything else, I think that'd be awesome. You just don't need to give him much playing time because has a lack of power, can still hit for solid contact, but again, leaves a bit to be desired at this point in his career. But going back to Christian Walker, again, a guy that I do think makes levels of sense for this Mets team. Might not be the sexiest pick, but if you look at how he and someone like Polanco could platoon first base DH, you will get production there. And you will get two guys that should be able to give you 25 plus home runs next season, hopefully, and that against 75 to 90 to 100 RBI category. And you're taking that every day of the week if you're getting those two to kind of help replenish Alonso instead of running back with Pete and having Marte and having more of the same. So again, I would have loved Alonso to return. I'm not happy that he's gone. I made that abundantly clear. But now that he is gone, we have to talk about options that can make levels of sense in the meantime. And I do think Walker, again, falls in that category. But all right, let's not talk about Christian Walker anymore. Let's say to ourselves, okay, if it ain't gonna be Yandy Diaz, if it ain't gonna be Christian Walker, if it ain't gonna be Isaac Paredes, what's one player that's available in the free agent market that, and I will preface, maybe is less likely because of what Salmon said. It appears more likely in the trade market than the free agent market, just because there's more guys available in the trade market potentially that fit this profile for the Mets. Well, there are a couple that are available in the free agent market, and one of them is someone who's not notoriously known for playing first base, but has an insane amount of power, and is a guy that is like a Vientos profile, but is what Vientos hopes he can max out to be in his career at his absolute best. Someone who, again, if you're platooning at DH and first base, it's palatable because it doesn't seem like it'll be too much of a defensive woe to the point that that outweighs their immediate offensive upside. Look no further than yet another player, a former Christian Walker teammate, another guy that's played in only small markets in his career for the most part, but has tremendous power. You can sign to a short-term contract because he's not going to get a long-term deal at all. It's Gino. It's Eugenio Suarez, another guy that we've talked about on the platform plenty this offseason. Because again, Eugenio Suarez brings probably more than anything else available in the trade and free agent market. Like if you're David Stearns and you're like, you know what, I mean stubborn, I just didn't want Alonso long-term, but I want a profile like him for his immediate bat upside. Suarez is the only guy in this free agent class that really checks off those boxes, as we know of certainty. Okamoto we'll get into in a second, I promise, and we'll go on from there. But Eugenio Suarez is a guy coming off of a 49 home run season, 118 RBIs, a 228 average, a 298 on base, and a 526 slug, good for a 3.8 WAR and 25% above league average. Right in the same ilk of someone like Alonso. It's fitting that this is the most home runs Suarez has ever had in his career since the 2019 season when he was with the Reds and when he lost to, yes, Pete Alonso, who just bested him with 53 home runs for the most out of the National League that year, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, that's okay, but I know Alonso had more than Suarez as they were first really bursting on the scene that season, 2019. What was the trend for Eugenio Suarez, who raked in Cincy and raked during his time in Arizona before being traded to the Mariners? And so, yeah, playing in batters parks. Have you guys not seen the trend by now? When Suarez went back to the Mariners, because he was previously with them in the from the traded line this year, along with Josh Naylor, he didn't transition nearly as well with his offensive numbers. He did not handle the midseason transition as well, and that went in hand with why his numbers aren't as sexy from the average to on base versus how they were looking at the traded line. But nonetheless, if the Mets are truly looking for a right-handed bat, a short-term option, who can give you first base reps, who can also play DH to split with Jorge Polanco, Eugenio Suarez is the best power threat of a profile in the mix that we're discussing today. And when you look at Suarez's numbers, again, they're nothing overly crazy, but there's some things to like. And one of the things that's notable to me when I look at Suarez is not just the 89th percentile in batting value, it's 89th in barrel percentage. It's also 78th there in hard hit percentage. And it kind of similar to, not far off from Christian Walker. So this is Christian Walker side by side, right, on Savant. And then here is what we have in Eugenio Suarez. So fairly similar. Obviously, a guy that's going to swing and miss a lot. If you're going to hit 49 home runs in a year, I'm led to believe that you're going to be looking to hit everything. Okay, that's just naturally going to happen. But Suarez is typically a guy that's a steady bat to give you around 30-plus home runs a year. Could be 40-plus for the Mets next year, but I'm not banking on that turnout again. That's a walk year for Suarez. He's probably not going to hit more than 35 next season, but I would be happy to be proven wrong if he dominates in a Mets uniform. And also, he would then rekindle that relationship with Jorge Polanco, who he had the privilege of having a nice deep playoff run with the Mariners with this past year. So these are guys, again, no success, no levels of winning, have been around in really good organizations that bring a lot to the table. So add Eugenio Suarez into the mix. If the Mets land him, don't be shocked, because we've talked about him a lot already this offseason as a short-term fit for DH/now first base, third base. And goes without saying, obviously, you don't acquire any of these players without most certainly making sure that Mark Vientos is traded. But I'm not even taking into account Mark Vientos right now. So if the Mets are in the market for a right-handed bat that's a first base profile, that's quite literally saying, we don't have faith and trust in you, Mark. We are going to look for a more guaranteed thing. It's as simple as that. So going on from Eugenio Suarez, everybody, let's get into another profile, which I like a lot, I really do, but not when I'm going to get my hopes up, just because I have no clue if the Mets are really going to be a suitor for Kazuma Okamoto. I also don't know the kind of contract Okamoto is going to land. The jury's still out on that front. But a lot to like about Kazuma. I'm going to be very brief on him. MPB stud has been the top player coming from Japan, not named Munetaka Murakami this offseason from position player standpoint. First position player in Yomiuri Giants history in Japan to be posted. So that's a big deal for him. Has a swing and a follow through, eerily similar to both David Wright and a little bit of Mike Piazza. When you guys see the side-by-side, has looked fantastic at third base, above league average at first base, and can handle left field. That positional versatility is so attractive, and that's why, like Cody Bellinger, I could see Okamoto being a nice fit for this Mets team. But if a trade is more likely than, say, the free agent route, then, again, I'm not going to get my hopes up on Okamoto. But the Red Sox are in Okamoto's market before the Wilson Contreras trade. Are they still in his market now? Maybe view him as a third base fit best, knowing that Bregman may not return? Possibly. But if Okamoto doesn't go to Boston, there's going to be a wide array of suitors still. And I'd imagine the Mets are in his market, but to a degree. And I don't exactly know to what degree. Okamoto is a guy that steadily hits around 30 home runs, north of 90 to 100 RBIs every single year. But in a smaller sample size, due to being posted this past year, he still dominated to 327 average, 416 on base, almost 600 slug for 110% above league average as a batter. A lot to love about Kazuma. I love his profile. He's a guy that feels like he's going to be a really good pickup wherever he lands. Could be one of the sneakiest free agent signings of any team this entire offseason, because unlike Munetaka Murakami, Kazuma's floor is tremendous. He's a guy that should be able to impact any major league team positively, proficiently, both offensively and defensively next season. The power should transition. It's still hopefully being a 20-plus home run hitter at the major league level. If he can get to 30, that's great, but we'll see if he actually transitions that smoothly and that easily. Defensively, he's expected to be a great transition, and Murakami pales in comparison. Murakami makes Vientos look like a Gold Glove at third, whereas Okamoto is like actually a Gold Glove at third. He's that good. And if you bring in Okamoto, you can get very creative on your lineup. You can have him get reps at both first and third, depending on what the future is going to be for Brett Beatty. If there's any uncertainty there, not that they need to trade him. I'm just saying again, who knows what David Stearns is going to do? Okay, he's made it abundantly clear he doesn't mind parting ways with your favorite players and not losing sleep over it. Okay, so Kazuma Okamoto, if the Mets go down the free agent route, easily one of the best, if not the best option out there for the Mets to get on a contract that shouldn't be anything that you're like, oh my God, why the Mets do this? No, he should be at a reasonable price for any team that has the luxury of signing him. But all right, maybe you say to yourself, I want the Mets to land a righty bat. Maybe not someone that's a true first base profile, but I want the Mets to land a righty bat this offseason. I want the Mets to land someone that can bring them immense upside right away, a World Series champion, great experience, elite defense, albeit it's more at third base than anything else, but could platoon third base, first base, doing something that Rafael Devers simply stubbornly did not want to do for the Red Sox, but was so willing to do for the Giants, like the schmuck that he was in that entire ordeal. Let's go ahead and talk about the man who replaced Rafael Devers from the Red Sox last year. That is, yes, Alex Bregman. Now, what I like to make clear about Alex Bregman is the fact that I'm not going to get my hopes up on Bregman. Bregman feels like a similar situation to a Kyle Tucker, where if it happens, it'll probably be more so because he'll kind of fall in the Mets' lap, where his market doesn't materialize the way that he hopes. Bregman is a Boris Klein, as we know, and after opting for a 3-year, $40 million AAV contract with the Red Sox this past year, which was just insane money, he opted out, and now he's looking for more of that longer-term deal. Are the Detroit Tigers going to pony up and give him that deal? Is another team desperately going to give Bregman that long-term deal? Because if that doesn't happen, if he's more in the short-term high EV option yet again, the Mets should be all over this, okay? Bregman had another very good year. Dealt with injury, but when healthy was good. 18 home runs, 62 RBIs, 273 average, 360 on base, 462 slug, 3.5 WAR season, 25% above league average. But Bregman, again, brings everything that you're looking for. A great clubhouse leader, a champion-type leader, someone separate from the cheating scandal, actually won without a scandal comfortably against the Phillies in the early 2020s when the Phillies went to the World Series and lost to the Astros in 6 games. Bregman is a profile that would fit so much, I think, for this organization, and having winners a part of the organization, guys that have stepped up. Like, if you had Marcus Semien and Alex Bregman and Lindor in this infield together, not only are you going to look great defensively, but you're going to have a lot of really good vocal leaders. Like, that is what you want. That's the type of clubhouse culture that really takes this team to another level in ways that'll help separate themselves from others in the National League East, as you have the Phillies kind of going into retool as well to a degree. You have the Nationals on the rise and the Marlins on the rise. The Mets need to do things to separate themselves, and Bregman would most certainly help in that regard. Now, again, I'm not going to get my hopes up on Bregman because he's stubbornly looking for that long-term contract, and while I don't know if he's going to get it this offseason, it's hard to envision the Mets being that team because he's entering his age 32 season. There's little to no chance to see the Mets giving a 6-7 year contract to Alex Bregman. Not going to happen. But Bregman has stayed so steady, one of the best eyes in the game, 97 percentile in squared up percentage, 95th in chase percentage, 92nd in whip percentage, 88th in K percentage, 73rd in walk percentage, 83rd in outs above average. A very good defensive value that he brings there at the hot corner still, and he's just unbelievably steady. That's what I can't emphasize enough regarding someone like Bregman. He's just so steady of a bat and a defender. You know what you're getting, and you know what you're getting for at minimum the next couple years. And that would help the Mets right now as they continue to be in this win now stage, while of course making sure that they don't completely give up the entire farm. Even if they trade for a Skubal, they wouldn't be giving up the entire farm because their farm is so deep. So the Mets are in a very good position to have both short and long-term success as long as they position themselves properly, but to be determined if they actually do exactly that. But Alex Bregman, I like a lot. I would be for him, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. One more player that I'm not really going to go on much of a tangent on. I don't even have a graphic for you for him, but I'll just mention him for the sake of it being a bat first player, going back to the article. Another guy that's looking for a long-term contract, and that's Bo Bichette. Again, Bo Bichette had a fantastic year, a massive bounce-back year for the Blue Jays in his walk-year after having a not even 600 technically OPS in 2024 due to injury. 2025, he stepped the hell up. 18 home runs that we saw, 78 runs scored, a 311 average, a 357 on base, a 483 slug, a 840 OPS. He was a stud, Bo Bichette, this past year. A huge playoff performer, a World Series stud there for the Blue Jays. Wasn't for a lack of effort in their attempts to beat the Dodgers this year. 99th percentile in expected batting average. It was so good. A lot of good numbers alike. But what is Bo Bichette not good at? Defense. He was in the first percentile for his infield position this past year. He's just not a good shortstop at all. He's a guy that profiles best easily at either second, third, or first base. If the Mets effed around and gave Bo Bichette a pretty contract to be a fairly longer-term option for the Mets at first base and or third platooning, that would be kind of crazy. I'm not going to get my hopes up on it either, but just for the sake of having this conversation, knowing that the Mets are involved in a lot of players' markets, let's talk briefly here on Bo Bichette. So I definitely would love to know your thoughts on Bo. If you think that he at all makes sense of a fit, or do you think that a lot of the other guys that make a lot more sense, in my opinion, the opinions of many, check off more boxes than what Bichette would immediately bring you. He's only entering his age 28 season, though, so definitely a guy that even if you invested in him, say let's go anywhere from a 5 to a 7-year range for Bichette, if it's 5 years, that brings him to his age 33 season. Mets just traded a 33-year-old or soon-to-be WardyNYM, for example. So it's not like that's out of the realm of, being a guy that could do well for you during that time frame of a 5-year window. 7 years is where things get a little dicey, but again, you worry about the back end of that contract when you have to. Not necessarily something you worry about right now. But one final player that I did want to get into before we get out of here is, yes, you guessed it, Cody Bellinger. But there's a specific reason why we're talking about Cody Bellinger today before we get out of here. And for the past 2 videos I've done, pre-record videos, we've had Bellinger be our final discussion. Also, the Reds are in the trade market for Luis Robert, so the Mets fans that don't want to see Robert happen, hope and pray he lands with the Reds. Otherwise, don't be surprised as the Mets continue to be in his market, because that very well could happen. But Cody Bellinger, we did see a piece, and this was Polanco talking to the media earlier, just emphasizing his versatility, his ability to play first base, and that Marte was a helping hand and why he landed here with that hospitality, and that he's expected to have a good amount, which was a very good question by the media today. Shout out to them. They actually had some solid ones. Not so great ones. We heard one remark asking Polanco's first question, now that he's a New York Met, his thoughts on Alonso Diaz leaving. So I'm happy to see that some people, and they know exactly who they are on the beat, are far more focused on, again, just that kind of silly reaction that's just going to have the fans getting all spiced up than anything that made sense, because Polanco had nothing to add really to. He's like, it's business. What else do you want me to say about it? But here's a piece that came out yesterday morning from Will Salmon. Why Mets should forego discipline, pursue Cody Bellinger, which I wholeheartedly agree on. And when Salmon says stuff, there's good reason for it. Will has had more things accurately covering the Mets than anyone else on the beat this year. And not only has he broken more news than anyone else regarding Mets breaking news of signings, of trades, and of connections than anyone else, but again, Sam is very tapped in. I'm very happy to have him as a friend on the platform here. But in this article, he states that, the Mets should, again, push aside the discipline notion on spending for Bellinger because of how much he's clearly a team fit for this organization. But he stated something I thought was notable. He said that the Mets, of course, have more of a palette of a 4-year contract for someone like Bellinger. Bellinger is someone who's expected to get a contract, let's say north of 5 years. But here's the thing. If Bellinger doesn't get a contract of 6 years, 7 years, God forbid 8, but it's in more that 5-year range, like at most, if what Salmon states holds true, that a bidding war doesn't even cause him to go beyond 5 years, that's right in the Mets window. I think that's like slam dunk, perfectly fine. Like, don't want to go farther than that. But 5 for a soon-to-be, 31-year-old, that would bring him to his age 35, 36 season, I think you can deal with that. And again, you worry about the back end of that deal when you have to worry about it. Cody Bellinger, I've said it time and time again, he checks off more boxes than almost anyone else. His ability to play dominant first base, first base, left field, center, right field is what causes endless possibilities for him. And he's handled the New York market. He's an MVP caliber player, World Series champion with the Dodgers. He's handled big markets his whole career from LA to Chicago to New York now. That, again, he checks off so many boxes for the Mets. It's actually hilarious. So Yankees fans need to buckle up because there's a solid reality. The Mets bring in more former Yanks, and Cody Bellinger may very well be that big splash that they do. But 91st percentile in K percentage, 84th in whip percentage. If he goes back to the Yanks, he goes back to the Yanks. But I'm sure the Mets will continue to be involved because they've been reportedly connecting him all offseason long. 93rd percentile in outs above average, 91st in arm strength, 83rd in arm strength, 91st in arm value, 72nd in sprint speed. A guy that could give you 20 to 30 stolen bags a year, hit 25 to 30 home runs a year, RBIs from the 80 to 100 category, depending on how deep and good the lineup looks. Almost a 5-WAR season this past year, 25% above league average. This is the guy, okay? It all is going to just come down to years for someone like Bellinger, I think. And we'll see how stubborn David Stearns is in that regard, or if it really is like at most 5 years, like what Salmon stated in his article, it really, in my opinion, changes the vision on him a little bit, at least from a fan point of view. Because I've been under the belief the whole time Bellinger is going to get at minimum 6 or 7 years. Pause. And I do think that that'll hold true in the end, that he will land one of those numbers because of what the bidding war will cause. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll be happy to be wrong because maybe me being wrong will increase the likelihood of Bellinger becoming a New York Met in the end. And here's the thing. If the Mets land in Bellinger, you could still land Bellinger and land one of those right-handed first base types. It would just, if anything, lessen the reps you put Bellinger at first base. But who cares? You need outfielders, all right? The Mets need outfielders, okay? All they have is Juan Soto and Tyron Taylor and an unproven Carson Bench at the moment, okay? They could easily sign Bellinger and have him play the majority of reps in the outfield next season while giving him the occasional reps at first base because you want to get creative with the rest of the lineup. So endless possibilities with a lot of the guys that we discussed today with the versatility that they bring. Whether it's great versatility defensively or bad, either way, it's versatility nonetheless. Bellinger is the great, and the bad would be more in the category, I think, of a Eugenio Suarez, and to a degree, an Isaac Paredes that don't bring as much defensively for you. But everybody, and Okamoto is a great versatile option too. But Mets fans, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. I greatly appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way out, and help us get to 38K subscribers. We're a couple hundred subs away, and we're doing a brand new Mets jersey giveaway on the platform once we get that latest milestone to 1 lucky subscriber. So thank you guys again so much for watching. Be on the lookout for more content drop later on today. Until then, have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out, everybody.